B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Moed Katan Daf Zayin. We're going to start from the Mishnah, 16 lines from the bottom of Daf Vav Amud Beis. Says the Mishnah, Tzodin es ha'ishois ve'es ha'achborim. If somebody needs to trap because these creatures we're about to mention are causing damage to the fields, an ishois, which maybe is a mole, and achborim, which maybe is what we call mice, mistei ilon umistei halovon, both from a field with trees or from a field with grain, kedarkoi, he can do it in a normal fashion. He doesn't need to do it in an unusual way, because the damages are enough to allow us lekatchila to do these things. B'moed, also on chol hamoed, ub'shvius, and also on shvius, even though he's fixing his field by getting rid of these damaging creatures, but nonetheless he's allowed to do it on chol hamoed and on shmita. The Chachamim argue and say, mistei ha'ilon, from a field where there's trees, then kedarkoi, he's allowed to trap these animals in a regular, usual way, because the damages are very great, and therefore he's allowed to do it without having to deviate from the normal way at all. Or mistei halovon, however, from a field with grain, there the damages are somewhat less, and therefore, even though one is allowed to trap these animals, shaloi kedarkoi, he should do it in an unusual way, in a way that's different from the way he would do it on a regular weekday. Continues the Mishnah with another halacha, umakrin es hapirtza b'moed. If somebody has a fence around his gina, around the garden where things are growing, it's not a regular courtyard, which is called a chotza. We're talking about gina, the Gemara is going to explain, and in a wall around the gina, if there's a breach in that fence, in that wall, then you're not allowed to in a regular way fix the wall, but in an unusual way on chol hamoed, you're allowed to fix the breach in the wall. To build a wall lekatchila, that you wouldn't be allowed to do on chol hamoed. Another halacha, says the Mishnah, ubishvius, regarding the Shemitah year, boine kedarkoi, he's even allowed to build an original wall, not a wall that's got breached and broken, but he's allowed to build a wall, and he's even allowed to do it kedarkoi in a very usual manner. And the chiddush is that even though it looks like he's guarding the fruits and the crops inside the field, but since he's doing it to protect the field, therefore he's allowed to do it, and obviously he has to make sure to keep to all the halachas of allowing everybody to come and take from the field. Continues the Gemara. Says the Gemara, my ishois. We mentioned at the beginning of the Mishnah that one is allowed to trap an ishois creature on chol hamoed or on shmita because it's ruining the trees in the field, or ruining the crops. So what is this ishois? Omer Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says it's a beria she'ein lo einaim. It's some creature that doesn't have any eyes. Omer Rav bar Yishmael, v'itei Rabbi Yemer bar Shlamya, Ma'ikra. What would be your source that this animal referred to as ishois cannot see? So we bring proof from a pasuk in Tehillim. The pasuk says, "Kamoi shablul temes yahaloich," in the same way as possibly a snail that just melts away as it slithers away, then so too neifel eishes bal chozu shomesh. This eishes also just falls and dies because bal chozu shemesh, because it doesn't see the sun, it can't see. So you see here that the eshes is a creature that does not see. Continues the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanon, Tzodin es ha'ishois ve'es ha'achborim mistei halovon umistei ha'ilon kedarkoi. This was similar to the Tanakama in our Mishnah, but the Brisa continues, umachrivin choyrei nemolim. If you have ants that are causing damage, you're allowed to destroy the holes of the ants. Keitzad machrivin. How do you destroy these holes? Reb Shimon ben Gamliel oimer mevi offer michur zeh v'noisen netoy choyr zeh. You take the earth, possibly with some ants, from one colony of ants, from one hole of ants, and you bring the earth, possibly with some ants, to the other hole. V'hin choinkin zeh zeh. Since the ants of this hole do not recognize the earth of the other hole, then they get all confused and they end up strangling each other, and that's how you get rid of the ants. Omer of Yemer bar Shlamya mishmei Abaya, or said in the name of Abaya, that this will only work if the ants in one hole don't recognize the earth of the other hole. but why shouldn't ants recognize a neighboring ant's holes? So says Abaye, first of all, it's got to be that the two holes, which, so to speak, the ants of one are going to strangle the other, or the earth of one hole is going to make the ants of the other hole strangle each other. But it's got to be on two different sides of a river. It's got to be that there's no bridge between one side of the river and the other side of the river. And not only a regular bridge, even a very narrow type of bridge, which is just a board going over the river, even that you haven't got. Not only that, but even a type of a bridge which is even narrower than that, a type of bridge that you need ropes on either side to hold on to in order to cross it. And even that mustn't be. And also, ad parasol, it's got to be that there's at least a distance of a parasol between the two holes. If these conditions are met, then taking the earth of one hole and putting it into the other hole will actually cause the ants in the hole to strangle each other, and he'll be relieved from the issue with the ants. Continues the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, we saw that the Tanakama said that you can get rid of and you can trap and get rid of the Ishes and the Achborim from both a stei ha'ilon and a stei ha'lovon, and you can do a kedarko in your regular way on Chol HaMoed and on Shemitah. And in the version of the Gemara that we have here, it's not the Chachomim, it's actually Rabbi Yehuda. It seems that there was a version like that in the Mishnah that didn't say V'chachomim oimrim, rather Rabbi Yehuda omer, that it depends what type of field. If it's a stei ha'ilon where there's trees, then you can get rid of it kedarkei in a regular, unusual manner, because the damage is much greater. However, in a stei ha'lovon, where the damage is less, then it's shaloi kedarkei, you're only allowed to get rid of these creatures in an unusual manner. Tanu Rabbanon. So we saw in the Brisa, Keitzad kedarkei, how do you get rid of these creatures in a regular fashion? Says the Brisa, Choifer Guma, he digs a hole in the ground, and he hangs a trap in it, and the holes, because there's a hole in the ground, the creatures are going to come out through these holes, and then they're going to go into the trap, and you'll have caught these animals. How do you trap these animals in an unusual way? Says the Brisa, Noyitz Shpud, he sticks a spit into the ground, umake bekardoim, and he hits it with a hammer, umarada, and he ha'adoma, and he flattens the earth, mitachtel, from under these animals, and either then he's going to end up crushing the animals, or will end up, the earth will fall on the animals, whatever it will be. If you flatten the earth where these animals are inside, then you will manage to dispose of these animals. Continues the Gemara. Tanya, Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer. We saw in the Brisa that Reb Shimon ben Elazar holds that Kashe'omru mistei lovon shaloi kedarkoi, that when it's said in our Mishnah or in the Brisa that from a stei lovon, Rabbi Yehuda says that because it's just a field of grains, not of trees, then you're allowed to get rid of these creatures shaloi kedarkoi in an unusual way. Lo omru elo b'stei lovon asmucha le'ir. That's only true if this field is just next to a city. Aval b'stei lovon, but if there's this type of grain field, which is asmucha l'stei ha'ilon, which is neighboring a field where there's trees, afilu kedarkoi, then you can get rid of it, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, in a regular fashion. Shemo yetzu mistei ha'lovon v'yachrivu es ha'ilonos, because these creatures, the ishes and the achborim, may go out of the stei halovon, where they're indeed causing a little bit less damage, and enter the field, the stei ha'ilon, where they will cause a lot of damage, and therefore you can get rid of it in a usual manner. Continues the Gemara, this takes us back to the next halacha in the Mishnah. Umakrin es hapirtza b'moed, you're allowed to, in an unusual manner, you're allowed to close up a block in a pirtza. You're allowed to block up a breach in a wall, and we're about to see that it's the wall of a gina, and it's not referring to the wall of a chotzer. Says the Gemara, Keitzad makrin, how are you allowed to close up this breach, assuming that it has to be done in an unusual way? Rav Yosef Omer behutza v'dafna. He says that Rav Yosef says you're only allowed to use different types of branches from a palm tree, from other trees, but you can only use these branches to fix the hole. But Masnitaton in a brisa we learnt that Tzar b'tzror, he can pile up some stones where the wall is breached, ve'ene toch betit, but he's not allowed to smear it with plaster. Omer of Chisda. Says Rav Chisda, Lo yishanu, this that we said that you're allowed to close the wall and you have to do it with a shinui, in an unusual way. He's not allowed to build that wall and fix that wall in a usual fashion, is only talking about elo koisel hagina, only if it's the wall going round a garden, where even if it's breached, even if people are going to come into that field, the damages will not be very great. Aval koisel hachotzer, but in the case that it's a regular courtyard that you have, which is not a field, there if people come in, they can steal your property, and the damages are much more, then boine kedarkoi. He's allowed to even build a wall from scratch, and he's allowed to build it in a regular way, because a wall there is extremely necessary, and if you don't have the wall, it can cause a lot of damage, and therefore you're allowed to build such a wall. Says the Gemara, it could be that we can bring proof from the following brisa to Rav Chisda that in a wall of a chotzer, you're actually allowed to build it kedarkoi. Because it says in the brisa, koisel hagoichel rishus harabim, a wall that's leaning over the rishus harabim, soiser uboina. You're allowed to break down the wall and rebuild it kedarkoi in a regular fashion, mipnei asakona, because it's dangerous. On Chol HaMoed, you're allowed to do this. The wall is leaning, it's a danger. You're allowed to demolish it and rebuild it kedarkoi. So is this proof to Rav Chisda that on Chol HaMoed, when you're allowed to build a wall, assuming it's the wall of a chotzer, that you're allowed to build it on Chol HaMoed kedarkoi? Says the Gemara, no, it's no proof. Hasam keduktoni taima mishum asakona. Over there, the problem is that, or it says explicitly that you're only allowed to build it kedarkoi because of the sakona, because it was a danger. Even though the danger, we'll soon see this in the Gemara later, but even though in the danger only required that you demolish the wall, once the wall is demolished, it's not going to fall on anyone, but if you're not going to be allowed to rebuild the wall, you'll refrain from demolishing it. And therefore we say, since it's a danger, and only because it's a danger, you're allowed to demolish it and rebuild it kedarkoi in a regular way. But in a case where it's not a danger, it's just a loss of money, as by us, we're talking about hefsed, we're talking about loss, we're not talking about danger, it could well be, not like Rav Chisda said, and even the koisel chotzer, you're not allowed to build kedarkoi on Chol HaMoed. So you don't have proof from that brisa. V'ikad Amra, there's a little bit of a different version. Tashema, we're actually going to ask a question on Rav Chisda. Koisel hagoichel rishus harabim soiser uboina kedarkoi mipnei asakona. The Gemara is bringing that same brisa we just saw, that a wall that is leaning and threatening a rishus harabim, a public place, you're allowed to demolish it and rebuild it because it's dangerous. So the Gemara says mipnei asakona in, only because it's a danger. Sheloi mipnei asakona, but when there's no issue of a danger, loi, you're not allowed to build it on Chol HaMoed kedarkoi, and that's against what Rav Chisda said, that by koisel chotzer you're allowed to build it kedarkoi. Maybe we can refute Rav Chisda from this brisa. Says the Gemara, no. Omar lachor Rav Chisda hasam. The Rav Chisda says that it's true that over there it's because it's a danger, and there's something you're allowed to do there only because it's a danger, and you wouldn't be allowed to do when it's just a regular hefsed. But there's still no proof that you're not allowed to build it, because over there we're allowing you to do two things. Hasam, over there, because it's a danger, soiser uboine, we let you demolish the wall and to rebuild it. Hacha, however, here where it's not a danger, it's just a hefsed, boina, you're allowed to rebuild it kedarkoi, says Rav Chisda, v'loi soiser, but you're not allowed to demolish it. So he says that it's true that, and the brisa says that it's only because it's sakona, but it's not a contradiction to what I said. There's no proof from there either, but there's no contradiction to what I said, because I'm only talking about doing one activity of building, not two activities that includes demolishing and building. Says the Gemara, Hasam over there in that brisa, where we're talking about a wall that's a danger, a sakona, nami lister v'loi livni. Why indeed are you allowed to rebuild it on Chol HaMoed? It should be sufficient because of the danger just to remove and demolish the wall so it will no longer threaten anybody. Why should you be allowed to rebuild it? Says the Gemara, because imkein mimna v'loi soiser. Because it could be, if you're not going to be allowed to rebuild it, you're going to refrain from demolishing it, and then you will not remove the danger. Omer Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, Masnisen nami daika. If you look well into our Mishnah itself, you'll see that there seems to be a proof to Rav Chizda that the Mishnah is only talking about the chotzer, the wall of a gina, and not the wall of a chotzer. Diktoni, because we learned in the Mishnah, we said in the Mishnah, Uba Shvius, that in Shemitah, boine kedarkoi, he's allowed to build this wall kedarkoi. It's the last words of the Mishnah, that to build a wall in a regular fashion, you're allowed to do that in Shemitah. So the question is, Dehecha, what wall are we talking about? Are we talking about the wall of a regular chotzer? That can't be. We need a Mishnah to tell us that. Why should Shemitah stop me building a wall around my courtyard? Shemitah's only got halachas regarding fields, not regarding what I'm allowed to build in my courtyard. Elolav de gino. It must be we're talking about a type of enclosure, type of wall of a gino. And va'afel gav de merze command ovid netirusa. Even though it looks like during Shemitah that you are protecting and guarding the fruits, netirusa lepeira, you're protecting the fruits and not allowing the public to take it, something which is osir on Shemitah, shma minei, shma mino. So we see that this Mishnah must be talking about the kaisel of a gina. And even though it looks like you're protecting the fruits, you're allowed to put such a wall up because there's a certain level of protection you're allowed to give to the field that shouldn't get ruined from people you're allowed to put such a wall up. And we see the Mishnah is talking about the wall of a gina, not the wall of a chotzer, which is exactly what Rav Chizda said, that when it said before that you're allowed to build a wall, shaloi kedarkoi, that's only talking, says Rav Chizda, that's only talking about a kaisel of a gina and not the kaisel of a chotzer. Continues the next Mishnah. And the next Mishnah is going to take us into the halachas of tzoras. And let's just give a short introduction. It will help us through the sugya. Now the halachas of Metzora, there's a parasha in the Torah that discusses tzoras. And there's a Masechet Mishnayos, Negoim, and let's just make a very general overview. And even though there is tzoras also on a person's body, tzoras is a type of a boil, a type of a growth, or a discoloring, a white patch. There's 4 different shades of white, but the white patch called tzoras. And the halachas of tzoras apply to a person's body, they apply to his garments, and they apply to a building, to his home. Let's discuss a person getting tzoras on his body. So there's a bet, and there's 5 stages that we have to always know what stage we're talking about, and because the halachas very differ. The first point is tahir. The person is tahir. Everything is fine, nothing wrong with him, no discoloring, no tzoras. And then there's another stage. When a person sees discoloring, he's got to call the kohen. And only a kohen can determine whether it's tomei, whether he's a matzora or toir. So then he's got to call the kohen. The kohen will then say, either you're toir, this is not tzoras, or he'll say, yeah, this doesn't look good. And then he needs to, for a week, he needs to go into hezger, which there are certain halachas of hezger, which that is a week of, he's got to wait. He's got to wait for where he's in a secluded, confined place, but he's not yet muchlot. He's not yet a completely confirmed metzora. At the end of the week, one of 3 things could have happened. Either it got better, and then he's tahir, or it got worse, and then he becomes a muchlot, a confirmed metzora, or no change, and then there's a second week of hezger. That's called the hezger sheni, the second week. At the end of that second week, again the kohen comes, and then the kohen decides either he's tahir, or he's muchlot, or he becomes a confirmed metzora. Once a person is a confirmed metzora, he's got to wait till he heals, and once he heals, the kohen comes, and if the kohen says, yes, you're no longer a metzora, then we have a week of counting, where the person, that's called the Yemei Sfira, where a person has to count 7 days before he can finish his taira, his purification, and go back to normal. Now the halachas of Hezger, both the first Hezger and the second Hezger, is that he's allowed to stay in the city. He's still got the company of people, but he's not allowed to have any marital relations with his wife. When it comes to Mukhlat, he's allowed to have relations with his wife, but he has to be outside the city. He loses the company of the town, the company of the people. In the Yemei Toihar, the 7 days called Sfira, the 7 Yemei Sfira, there everybody agrees that he's not allowed to have marital relations with his wife. That seems to be how Rashi understood these halachas. Now there's another issue here, and that is that there's a certain time, for example on Yom Tov. On Yom Tov there's a mitzvah of v'samachta b'chagecha, you have to be happy. Now what happens if in the middle of Yom Tov on Chol HaMoed, a person says, oops, I'm seeing a stain, a boil, maybe this is tzaras. Then because it says v'samachta b'chagecha, you have to be happy on Yom Tov. Is this person supposed to or allowed to call the Kohen to tell him, what's my status? Am I Metzaira? Am I not a Metzaira? Now the answer is, the one answer that everyone agrees to, that since it says v'samachta b'chagecha, you're not allowed to cause extra aggravation and pain to this person. So it's like this. Rabbi Meir holds that a Kohen can come and he can say, I see he's tahir. You're tahir. He's very happy, no issues. Now what happens if he's not tahir? What happens if the other verdict the Kohen would give would be a verdict that is not so pleasant for this person? It's actually going to cause him anguish and pain and infringe on the samachta b'chagecha. Says Rabbi Meir, if that's the case, the Kohen just shouldn't say anything. Status quo, nothing will change. A Kohen is allowed to just say nothing. That's what Rabbi Meir holds. Rabbi Yossi says no. Rabbi Yossi says a Kohen is not allowed to say nothing. He's allowed to not go and look. But if he goes to look, he has to say whatever the halach is. So Rabbi Yossi says that it depends. If there's a chance, if one of the options here is that this person is going to be in a worse off situation after the Kohen has come than before, then because of a samachta b'chagecha, the Kohen shouldn't go at all. He shouldn't go to this person at all, and that way he will not infringe on this person's simchas Yom Tov. That's a basic overview. Just we'll introduce one last topic, and that is that there's going to be a machlekes here, and we're going to learn the Gemara like the Ritva does, where there's a three-way machlekes here, as to what does a person prefer more? What's more of a relief for him? To have company of the people of the town, or to be able to have relations with his wife? That is going to be a discussion. We're going to see that according to Rabbi Yossi says some people prefer to have the company of their wives. Other people prefer to have the company of the townspeople. And the difference to that will be, for example, if a person is in the second week of Hezger, where in the second week of Hezger, he's not out of the city, but he's not allowed to have relations with his wife. So and over there, if the Kohen comes, there's only two options, either to make him tahir or to make him a confirmed Metzaira, a Mukhlat, where he's going to get back his wife, but he's going to lose the people. So is that something which is going to destroy his Simchas Yom Tov or not? Well, Rabbi Yossi says it might, because it could be this is the type of person who needs the people more than his wife. And therefore making him a Mukhlat and sending him out of the town is going to be bad for him. Then he wouldn't be able to go. So Rabbi Yossi says, but on the other hand, when Rabbi Yossi says there's also a chance that a person prefers to have his wife than to have the people, and in which that will have a halachic ramification if he is already a confirmed mukhlat, a confirmed Metzaira, and now if the Kohen comes and says that you're no longer a Metzaira, you can start counting, then once he starts counting, he's going to then be osa to his wife. And then maybe this person prefers to have his wife than to have the people. And therefore he will not, as a mukhlat, the Kohen won't be able to come. So Rabbi Yossi is like in every particular case, he says maybe this person will prefer his wife, maybe he'll prefer the public, and therefore in either case, if he's going to either lose the public or lose his wife, then you're not allowed to go to this person at all on Chol HaMoed. That's Rabbi Yossi. We're going to see that according to Reb Meir, he definitely holds that people prefer to have the public, than to have their wives. And therefore we're going to soon see that according to Reb Meir, there will be halachic ramifications to that. For example, if he was a muchlot, according to Reb Meir, we'll have no problem saying the kohen can come, because if the kohen says that he's still a muchlot, he's still tomei, nothing's changed. Status quo. If he says that he can now start counting, starting to count means I can come back in. If I can come back in, then I have people. And I prefer to have people than to have my wife, even though he's not going to have relations with his wife for that week. So Kontra Meir will have no problem with that. And even the Hezger Sheni, the Kohen is allowed to come, even though this person who needs people, and if after Hezger Sheni the Kohen says you're now muchlot, he's going to lose people, but let's remember, Reb Meir holds that the Kohen is allowed to remain silent. So if the end of the Hezger Sheni, the Kohen can come. If the person is tired, he can say you're tired, and you're fine. If he's tomei, he's now become muchlot, he doesn't need to say anything. Status quo, you'll stay in the situation of Hezger until after Yom Tov. That's Reb Meir and Reb Yossi. We're going to see that Rabbi is a sort of in the middle. He's going to hold, number one, Rabbi is going to hold of Reb Yossi that says a Kohen can't be quiet. Either you go and you say the whole truth, or you don't go. That's one thing, that Rabbi holds like Reb Yossi. However, Rabbi argues with Rabbi Yossi because Rabbi says that a person always prefers the company of his wife than the company of people. But we're going to see there's going to be a machlokas what Rabbi holds, because there's one version of Rabbi that says the opposite, that Rabbi says a person always prefers the company of people, which is that what Rabbi Meir holds, and not the company of his wife. However, he's still going to hold like Rabbi Yossi that if the Kohen goes, you have to say the entire psak. And we'll soon see in the Gemara the details of this. So that is a basic outline of the sugya. Let's see the Gemara inside. Let's learn the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Reb Meir holds, Royim es hanagoyim b'tchila lehokel. Well, the word b'tchila is a bit of a discussion here, if it's supposed to be there or not. The Rishonim discuss that. But Reb Meir says you're allowed to see nagoyim. Nagoyim are these stains, these patches. A Kohen is allowed to see them lehokel, even though he's only going to say the ruling if it's a lenient one. And if it's a stringent ruling, then he's just not going to say anything. And the status quo will apply, and says, according to Reb Meir, that's okay. And we're talking about Chol HaMoed, and we have to make sure not to say a stringent ruling in order not to destroy the mitzvah of the samachta b'chagecha of this person. You're allowed to just not say the stringent ruling in the event that there would be one. The Chachamim argue with Reb Meir, and they say, Loy lahakel v'loy lahachmir. Says, no, don't go at all. Don't go, this is like we're going to soon see at Rabbi Yossi. He's going to say that if you go, then you have to say the whole psak. You have to say either way, if it's letom, it's learned from apostle, letoyer or letomi. You have to say the whole thing. In order not to hurt this person's simchas yom tov, you don't go bichlal. Says the Gemara, Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Reb Meir Oimer, and this is the same Reb Meir we saw in our Mishnah, Groyin es hanagoyim lehokel, avaloi lahachmir. The Kohen is allowed to go and give a lenient ruling in the event that the person is not Matzorah, and is allowed to be quiet and not say the stringent ruling. Rabbi Yossi Oimer, Loi lahokel v'loi lahachmir. He says that no, the Kohen shouldn't go at all. Because if you're going to involve yourself in going to see the tzaras lahokel, if you're going to see it with the intentions of being lenient in the event that the ruling is lenient, you'd have to also be involved with a more stringent ruling and give a stringent ruling in the event that he's tomei. And since we don't want to do that on Yom Tov, therefore you shouldn't go at all. Omar Rebbe. Rebbe says, and Rebbe holds, I hold like Rabbi Yossi, that if you go, you have to say the whole ruling. But Nirin Divrei Rebbe Meir b'muzgar. In the case where this person is a muzgar, which means he's now in the Hezger Sheni, then Rabbi holds that in that case, even though Rabbi Yossi says that you shouldn't go to the Kohen should not come at all, we'll soon see why, because according to Rabbi Yossi, the reason the Kohen shouldn't come is because if he's at the end of the Hezger Sheni, then what's the Kohen going to come? He's going to come and either say he's Toyer, that would be fine, or say that he's Muchlot. Now, if he's Muchlot, then he's going to become Osir to the public. He's going to have to leave the public. And we said before, Rabbi Yossi holds maybe this person prefers the public than his wife, and therefore you're going to destroy his Simchas Yom Tov by sending him away from the public. So Rabbi Yossi says, no, you're not allowed to, the Kohen shouldn't go at all at the end of the Hezger. And here Rabbi says, no. He says that I agree with Rabbi Yossi that if you come, you have to say the whole ruling. But I disagree with Rabbi Yossi that this person may prefer the public, because I, Rabbi Yossi, hold that he's definitely going to prefer his wife's company. And once he's a muchlot, once he's a confirmed Metzora, he can have relations with his wife. So whichever way you hold it, says Rabbi, I think, like Reb Meir said, that you're allowed to, the Kohen should go. Now the reason Reb Meir said the Kohen should go is because he can give just a lenient ruling. He doesn't have to give a stringent ruling, even if there is one. And Rebbe doesn't hold of that, as Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold of that. But Rebbe holds that in this case, that whichever way you hold it, you will not be destroying his Simchas Yom Tov. Because if you say he's Toyer, he'll be happy. If you say that he's now coming from a confined Metzora to a confirmed Metzora, he's also going to be happy. It's true that he's got a more stringent level of Tumah, and he has to leave the city and lose the company of the people. But Rabbi Yossi holds that he's waiting for the company of his wife even more. So it will be a Simchas Yom Tov for him. And therefore, Nirin Divrei Reb Meir b'muzgar, but Divrei Rabbi Yossi b'muchlot. However, if he's now already a confirmed Metzora, then I agree with what Rabbi Yossi says, that this person the Kohen shouldn't go at all, because if the Kohen comes, he might say you're now Toyer and you can start counting. And if you start counting, he's going to be also to his wife. And therefore, if he's a muchlot, he should not go at all. That's the opinion of Rabbi. Omar Rava. Rava explained as follows. With Toher, if the person, and we remember before, we said that there's 5 stages. Toher, Hezger Rishon, Hezger Sheni, Muchlot, and Yemei Sfira. So Rava is saying like this. But Toher, in the event that we're holding that he is Toher and he's now got a suspicion that he may be a Metzora, everybody agrees that the Kohen should not go on Chol HaMoed to see this tzoras. Why? Because Reb Meir holds that you, in any case, only allowed to give a lenient ruling. This person is Toher now. So the only thing you'll be able to say is Toher, if he's Toher. I don't need a Kohen for that. He is Toher. Because anything else you're going to say would be that you have to go into confinement. Well, that's, according to Reb Meir, the Kohen wouldn't be allowed to say that because of Simchas Yom Tov. So there's no point in the Kohen going. According to Rabbi Yossi says that the Kohen would have to say the whole truth. And if he says the whole truth, he might say he's Tomei. And if he says he's Tomei, he's going to destroy Simchas Yom Tov. So he can't go at all. So whichever way you hold it, if the person was Toher, you don't go to the Kohen doesn't go to see the Tzoras and Chol HaMoed. Behezger Rishon, and we're going to read the Gemara with the version we have in the Gemara. There's a big discussion here, but we're going to just understand the Gemara as we have it. Behezger Rishon, in the first Hezger, Dekule al Maloi Pligi, everybody agrees, Reb Meir and Rabbi Yossi, that the Kohen can go and see the Tzoras. According to Reb Meir, he can go because he's already now in Hezger Rishon. So what are the 2 options? Either you're Toher, or you have to have another Hezger. So according to Reb Meir, if he has another Hezger, you've lost nothing. Because it hasn't made anything worse. He was in Hezger anyway. If he's Toher, you've helped him. So you can go. Now the Rishonim ask, Tosfos, the Ritva, that at the end of the Hezger Rishon, it could be that he'll say that not Hezger Sheni, he might say Muchlot. He might say straight away that you've become a Muchlot. And therefore, why would Rabbi Yossi say, according to Reb Meir, he can come in and just say nothing? If he's Toyer, he's Toyer. If it's Hezger Sheni, he's nothing's worse. And if it's Muchlot, you just won't say anything. But according to Rabbi Yossi, who says that you have to say the whole truth, how can you say that there's the option of maybe he'll be a Muchlot, and then according to Rabbi Yossi, going from Hezger to Muchlot is a problem, as we said before, because maybe he prefers to have the people than to have his wife, and he's going to lose the people if he becomes a muchlot. So the Rishonim ask that, and the Rishonim say that in this case, Rabbi Yossi will agree that you're allowed to stay quiet. Only in a case where there's two options, tahor or tomei muchlot. If those are the two options, then you have to say the whole truth. However, in the case where you've got three options, there's an option of status quo of not tahor and not tomei. For example, you're in Hezger, and you're in the Hezger Rishon, in the first week of Hezger, and it might just be a second Hezger, then you don't have the pasuk that requires you that you have to say anything, and you're not allowed to be silent. In this case, Rabbi Yossi will agree you could be silent, and therefore, even according to Rabbi Yossi, the Kohen can go. Keep ligi. When are they arguing? When is there machlokes between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yossi? That's only behezger sheni. That if it's the second Hezger, and now if the Kohen comes and it's Chol HaMoed, at the end of the second week of Hezger, and now if the Kohen comes, either he's going to say that you're Tahir, or he's going to say that you're Muchlot, you'll become a confirmed Metzora. So Rav Meir says that the Kohen's allowed to go, because the Kohen is allowed to stay silent. Marasov, Rav Meir holds, the Kohen Talia Milsa, the Kohen is allowed to stay silent, and therefore, if it's Tahir, eat Tahir, or Malay Tahir, he'll tell him Tahir. Tommy, and if he's Tommy, Shosik, he'll just be quiet. Umarasova, and Rabbi Yossi holds, Letaroi or Letamiksiv. This is the pasuk that Rabbi Yossi learns, that it says in the pasuk, Letaroi or Letamo, you have to say either Tahir or Tommy. In the event that those are the only two options, like in the case at the end of the Hezger Sheni. So Rabbi Yossi says, if we're going to let the Kohen go, you might have to tell him he's a Muchlot. If he's a Muchlot, we might be hurting a Simchas Yom Tov, because he's going to lose the company of the people of the city. And therefore, Rabbi Yossi says you shouldn't go at all. Now, the truth is that they're also arguing not only by Hezger Sheni, they're also arguing by Muchlot. When it's completely Muchlot, and he's been totally Tomei, and he's been out of the city. He's had his wife, he hasn't had the people, and now is the Kohen now allowed to come to see if he's Tahir? There's also a Machlekes. Rav Meir says you're allowed to, because if he's Tahir, Rav Meir holds that a person prefers the company of people than the company of his wife, and therefore, even though he's going to then have a transition from Muchla to Yemei Sfira to the counting days, but the counting days he'll be also to his wife, but no longer be in the state of also to around the people, and therefore you will not be hurting his Simchas Yom Tov. So whichever way you hold it, according to Rav Meir, a Kohen can go to a Muchlot. Rabbi Yossi says you can't go to a Muchlot because maybe he's going to tell him that now you can start counting, you're going to be also to your wife. And Rabbi Yossi says we have to always be afraid that maybe this person wants and needs the company of his wife more than the company of the people, and therefore he'll be hurting the Simchas Yom Tov. So that is another case where there's a machlokas, not only by Hezger Sheni, but also by the Muchlot. Says the Gemara, Omar Mar, we saw before in the Brisa, that Omar Rabbi said that Nirin Divri Rabbi Yossi b'Muchlot, but Divri Rabbi Meir b'Muzgar. It's from Rabbi's words that we see that Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi were arguing not only by Muzgar Sheni, but also by Muchlot, as I just explained. And Rabbi said that even though Rabbi holds, like Rabbi Yossi, that if the Kohen comes, he has to give a full verdict, however, he argues with Rabbi Yossi on some level. And he says that Nirin Divri Rabbi Yossi b'Muchlot, I agree with Rabbi Yossi that the Kohen shouldn't go if he's in a Muchlot, because I hold like Rabbi Yossi, or I hold that, or says Rabbi, that this person needs his wife more than the people, and if you go when he's a Muchlot, then you may be telling him he has to start counting and he'll be also to his wife. But Div Reb Meir b'Muzgar, however, Rabbi says, I agree with Reb Meir that the Kohen can come in the case that he's in a Muzgar Sheni, even though Rabbi Yossi says you shouldn't go, because Rabbi Yossi says that if you're going to tell this person he's now a Muchlot, he might lose the company of the people, and even though he gets the company of his wife, but losing the company of the people will disturb his Simchas Yom Tov. Rabbi says no. Rabbi says that a person always prefers the company of his wife, and therefore, if he's a Hezger Sheni, you're allowed to go to him, and because even if you tell him he's a Muchlot, then you haven't heard to Simchas Yom Tov, because he'll be getting back to being able to have relations with his wife. Asks the Gemara, well, Tanya Ibcha, we learned in a different brisa that the second brisa says that I actually prefer Reb Yosi not by Muchlot, but I prefer Reb Yosi by Musgar. And by Musgar, Rebbe says that the Kohen shouldn't go, and by Muchlot, he holds like Reb Meir that the Kohen should go. Answers the Gemara, Tanoi, it's actually Machlekes Tanoim alibud Rebbe as to what Rebbe holds. In this second brisa of Rebbe, Marasova, the second brisa says that Rebbe holds Tzavsa de Alma Odifle, that a person always prefers the company of people. And that's why when he's in Hezger, then Rebbe will say, don't go, because if he becomes Muchlot, he'll lose people. But if he's Muchlot, then you can go because he's going to prefer the people, and then you won't be destroying his Simchas Yom Tov. Now, and this is not completely like Reb Meir, because Reb Meir says that at the end of the Hezger Sheni, even though Reb Meir also says that a person prefers people than his wife, but nonetheless, he'll say that at the end of the Hezger Sheni, Reb Meir will say, the Kohen can go. Why? If you say these Tomei, he'll be Muchla to lose the company of people. The answer is because Reb Meir himself holds that you can just be quiet and just say either Torah or say nothing. Rebbe doesn't hold of that. Rebbe holds, like Rabbi Yossi, that you can't say nothing. So you have to go. So if you go, you have to say something. And therefore, according to this opinion of Rebbe, by Musgar, don't go, because if you tell him he's Muchlot, he's going to lose the people, and that's not going to be good for him. But if he's Muchlot, you can go, because if you tell him that he has to count, but it's true he's going to be also to his wife, but he's going to get the people back, it's not going to destroy his Simchas Yom Tov. Or Marasova, and the original version of Rebbe we saw, that says that by the Musgar, the Kohen can go, and by the Muchlot, he can't go. He holds that Tzavsa the Ishte, Hatifale, like we said before, according to Rebbe, he prefers the company of his wife than the company of people, and that's why at the end of the Hezger, he can go, because if he tells him Toyer, he's definitely happy, and if he tells him Muchlot, then he's happy because he's getting his wife back. And in the case of Muchlot, he shouldn't go, because if you tell him that you're Toyer and you have to start counting, in the week of counting, he's also to his wife, and therefore it will disturb his Simchas Yom Tov, so he shouldn't go on Chol HaMoed. Says the Gemara, the Memra, from all this it seems, the Muchlot mutar b'tashmish hamita, that when a person is a confirmed Matzera, he's allowed to have relations with his wife. Says the Gemara, that's right, that's exactly what we're saying. Well, Tanya, and we learned this from a Brisa, because it says in the Brisa, V'chibes hamatayres begodov, v'gilach es kol sa'ori, v'rochatz v'mayim v'toyer, v'achar yovel amachne v'yoshav michutz le'oholoi shivas yomim. So here there's a posuk. The posuk is actually talking about the Yemei Sfira, the 7 days of counting, and in these 7 days of counting it says v'yoshav michutz le'oholoi, he has to be removed from his oihel. Who's his oihel? Shehei also b'tashmish hamita. And he's not allowed to have relations with his wife. That's what oihel means. Ve'ein olei elu ishtei, the word oihel, the literal translation is a tent, but it means being with his wife. Shenemar, as we see in another pasuk, leich emor lohem, shuvu lochem lo'oleichem. That after Matan Torah, the people were told, go back to your oihel, to your tents. And what actually meant was, you can have relations with your wife. So the pasuk seems to be saying here that you're allowed to, that in the 7 days of counting, even though you're allowed back to the people, but you're now osa to your wife. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that Shivas Yomim Yisburuloi, and Rashi says that even though these are words in Yecheskel, and the Gemara later on in the Masechet is going to learn from here different halachas with Matzera, but Rashi says that the Gemara didn't actually mean to quote this pasuk, and the Gemara was just referring back to the pasuk we just mentioned, that the Matzera in the 7 days of counting is also to be with his wife. And Rabbi Yehuda, according to version of our Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda says, Yemei Sfiroi, only during the week of counting, the Matzera is not allowed to be with his wife. V'lo Yemei Chilutoi, but the days before that, when he was a confirmed Matzera, he's mutter to be with his wife. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says no. Zayin Yemei Sfiroi, he says if the 7 days when you're of counting that you're allowed back to the people, you're not allowed to be with your wife, Kal v'chomer yemei chilutai. Then it goes without saying that in the yemei chilutai, that you're not allowed to be in the town, that you're not allowed to be with your wife. So we have here machleikus regarding the days of the muchlot days. Is he allowed to be with his wife or not? It's machleikus tanoim. Rabbi Yehuda says yes. Rabbi Yehuda says no. And let's soon see, because we're talking about Rebbe's opinion, and let's see. Rabbi says, Danti lifnei Rebbe. I reasoned with Rebbe. I asked Rebbe as follows: V'madatenu Rabbeinu, you Rebbe taught us that Yosam the son of Uziel, he was conceived from his father Uziel, when Elobimei Chilutoi, in a time when Uziel was actually a confirmed Metzera. So you see that if Yosam was conceived then it must be that marital relations is allowed in Yemei Muchlot. Omar Loi. So Rebbe answered back to Reb Chia, Af ani kachomarti. That's exactly what I hold. I hold that a Muchlot is allowed to have relations with his wife. So when we said at the beginning, the memra de Muchlot muta b'tashmish hamita, the answer is yes, you're allowed to. As we can see here, Rebbe holds that way. The Gemara is now asking, but my kamifligi, what's actually the point of the machleikas? On what nekuda are they arguing? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, the brayso we just saw, as to whether it's only osa to be with one's wife during the Mei Sfira, not during the Yemei of Muchlot, or not. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Savar, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda holds, Goli Rachmoni b'Mei Sfira, v'Kolshkin b'Mei Chinutai. That's the Kal V'chomer we saw before. That Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda holds that the Torah told us that in the 7 days of counting, you can't be with your wife. But we understand it's a kolshkin, it's a kal v'chomer. It goes without saying that in the days of muchlot, which is a much more severe stage of tumah, you're not even allowed into the town. And that over there also, a person is not allowed to be with his wife. Umar Sovar, however, Yehuda holds no. Goli. Whatever the Torah revealed to us, it revealed to us. And the Torah only told us that in the 7 days of counting, you can't be with your wife. Goli. But regarding the days of Muchlot, which the Torah didn't tell us that he's not allowed to be with his wife, he is allowed to be with his wife. Continues the Gemara. The Memra, from whichever way you hold this sugya, Rav Meir and Rav Yossi, we see clearly that the status of this person, whether he's Tahir, whether he's a Metzora Muzgar or Muchlot, is dependent on the words of a Kohen. It doesn't depend on the stain in and of itself. It needs the Kohen to come to see it and to say, to give the halachic ruling. The Memra, the Kohen Tali Milsa. That we had the Machleikas before, is the Kohen allowed to be quiet or not? But either way, it's the words of the Kohen that determine his status. Says the Gemara yes, you're right. Tanya, and we saw this in a brisa. It says in a brisa, Uveyoim hei ro'ois boy, bosor chai, yitma. What does it mean? That on the day where the Kohen will see bosor chai, which is one of the simonim of Tumah, then this person will be Tomei. So if we see from the words Uveyoim hei ro'ois, on the day that he will see, that yesh yoim shat boy, yesh yoim shiat boy. There are days that the Kohen will come, and there's days that the Kohen won't come. For example, on Chol HaMoed, in some cases the Kohen won't come, because the halachic status is dependent on the Kohen. And since it's dependent on him, there's days that we tell the Kohen go, and there's days that the Kohen will not go. Mikan Omu, and from here we determine that, for example, a chosn, in the week of Sheva Brachos, Noilad Boy Nega, suddenly he has a nega, he has this, something that might be tzaras, we give him 7 days of his Sheva Brachos, and the Kohen doesn't go. Loi, ulebeisai, uleksusai. Irrespective of whether we're discussing tzaras on his flesh, tzaras on his home, or tzaras on his garments, the Kohen doesn't go. And like we saw till now on Chol HaMoed, noisim lo shivas yimei haregel. We're not. If he's tired, the Kohen's not going to go. He's not going to go because it's dependent on the Kohen, and we're allowed to tell the Kohen, don't go, because it's now Chol HaMoed, and he's got to be happy. Divi Rabbi Yehuda, that was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi says, I agree with you that it's dependent on the Kohen, and I agree with you that not always the Kohen has to go. However, I don't need that pasuk of Ubayom Heiroyes Boy, because I've got Harei Omer, I've got a different pasuk. The pasuk says, V'tzivu HaKohen, the Kohen will command upinu es habayis before the Kohen says it's Tomei. Because if a Kohen says, for example, we're talking now about tzaras on the house, which is a big chiddush, because normally homes can't become Tomei. Things in a home can become Tomei, but a home itself is attached to the ground. Cannot become Tomei. The one exception to that is tzaras. But so the Kohen sees tzaras on the wall of this home, and he knows if I'm going to say this is Tomei, everything in the home is going to become Tomei. So the Kohen says, "Upinu es habayis," to remove anything that needs to stay toyer, all the utensils, remove everything from the house. But terem yovei HaKohen lirois es hanega, before the Kohen comes to actually see the nega. V'lo yitmo kol asher habayis, in order that everything in the house, the contents of the house, should not become Tomei. V'achar Kohen yovei HaKohen lirois es habayis, and only then the Kohen will come and will see the nega and will give his ruling. So Rabbi says, I've got this pasuk. V'tzivu HaKohen upinu es habayis. Im mamtinim lo l'davar reshus. If over there we actually wait, we delay the Kohen coming, just because we don't want things to become Tomei. It's not even a mitzvah. It's just convenience. We don't want the things in the house to become Tomei. V'dvar reshus kol sheken dvar mitzvah. It goes without saying that even for a dvar mitzvah, for example, Chol HaMoed, where there's Simchas Yom Tov, or Sheva Brachos, where he has to be happy, in all those cases, of course, that we'll delay the Kohen and tell the Kohen not to come. My binay. What's the difference if you learn it from the pasuk that Rabbi Yehuda says, from the pasuk of Uvayoyim Heiroyis Boy, or whether you learn out from the pasuk that Rabbi said from V'tzivu HaKohen upinu es habayis? Omar Abai says that might not be a halachic difference. Mashmos derishin nikim binay. There's only a difference of how you read the psukim. Rabbi Yehuda understood one pasuk, the words Uvayoyim Heiroyis, and Rabbi saw it in the other pasuk. The Rava argues with Abai, and Rava says no. Dvar harashus ikabinayu. There's a difference between the two, and that is regarding dvar harashus, which goes as follows. Of course, when it comes to a house, it's explicit in the pasuk, even though it's a dvar harashus. It's not a dvar mitzvah, but the pasuk says it's a chiddush. In any case, the whole concept of tzaras on a house is a chiddush. We wait. When it comes to tzaras on a person, on the body, on the flesh of the kohen, on the flesh of this person, for example, then there's going to be a machlekas. Because if you learn it out from V'tzivu HaKohen upinu es habayis, according to Rabbi, he actually learns out regular tzaras from tzaras of the bayis, and in the same way as tzaras on the home, we delay the kohen for dvar reshus. So too, tzaras on the person, we delay it. We delay it even for a dvar reshus, and kol sheken we delay it for a dvar mitzvah, for example, Chol HaMoed or a chosen. That would be according to Rabbi. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda doesn't learn it out from upinu es habayis, which is a dvar reshus. He learns it out from Uvayoyim Heiroyis Boy. Uvayoyim Heiroyis Boy would only be telling us that for a dvar mitzvah we can tell the kohen don't come. It's Chol HaMoed or a chosen, but for dvar reshus, that not. That means they both agree that by tumah of the bayis, that even with dvar reshus, we tell the kohen to wait. The discussion is regarding on the guf, on the body of the person has tzaras, do we delay the kohen coming for dvar reshus or not? And that depends. According to Rabbi, he says yes, you learn it from bayis, and Rabbi Yehuda says no, you can't learn it from bayis. We'll soon see why. Because bayis has its own chiddush, and therefore you can't learn it from there. So you can only learn from Uvayoyim Heiroyis Boy. From Uvayoyim Heiroyis Boy, you don't see that you wait or you delay the kohen even for dvar reshus, only for dvar mitzvah. Asks the Gemara of Rabbi Yehuda, mehasam loy gomrinon. The reason Rabbi Yehuda doesn't want to learn like Rabbi, doesn't want to learn it from V'tzivu HaKohen upinu es habayis, is the chiddush, because he learns that tumas batim is a tremendous chiddush. Because stones and woods attached to the ground, they never be, or they're not kelim at all, never become tomei. And here regarding tzaras, it becomes tomei. So Rabbi Yehuda says, I can't learn out that this leniency that we delay the kohen even for dvar reshus that we see explicitly by bayis, maybe it doesn't apply to the tzaras on the guf. Rabbi says no. I hold that you're right. It's a chiddush. Tumas batim is a chiddush. But I hold, says Rabbi, that you can learn out from tumas batim to the tumah of the gufa adam, on his body, on his flesh. And therefore Rabbi says that I learn out that to delay the kohen even for dvar reshus, even on the flesh of a person, that I can learn out from the pasuk of Tziva kohen upinu es habayis. Nonetheless, Rabbi says I also need the pasuk that Rabbi Yehuda had of ubiyom miroisboy. Rabbi Omar Yitzchok because if it would only say ubiyom miroisboy, I may have thought lidvar mitzvah in lidvar reshus loy. I may have thought that you only ever tell the kohen to delay coming if it's a mitzvah, or chosn, but not for dvar reshus. That's why it says v'tziva kohen, to say that there's a concept of delaying the kohen even for dvar reshus. But if it would only say v'tziva kohen, then I may have thought hani in delav tuma de gufe. I may have thought that only regarding Tumah on the Batim, we can delay it even for a Dvar Reshus. Aval Tumah de Gufe. But I may have thought that if it's Tumah on his flesh, Eima Merze Chazyale, I would have thought in that case, since it's a Chiddush, then you cannot learn out from the Tziva Kohen Upino Etzabayis. And therefore, I need the pasuk of Aviyom Herois boy to say that you can learn out from Upinu Es Habayis, that not only by Batim you can delay the Kohen coming even for Dvar Reshus, but even on the Gufay. That means I need the Aviyom Herois to allow me to learn from Batim to Gufay. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you can't learn Gufay from Batim at all. And indeed, that's why Rabbi said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you don't delay for Dvar Reshus on Tumah of Gufay. Rabbi says, no, between the two psukim, I can learn that even by Tumah, the Teras B'Gufay, you can delay even for a Dvar Reshus. And that means that even Rabbi needs Ubiyom Herois boy to tell us that for Dvar Mitzvah on Teras B'Gufay, we delay the Kohen. Once we see that for Dvar Mitzvah, we delay the Kohen on Tzuras B'Gufay, then we can already say that if you can delay the Kohen, then we can now learn from the Tziva Kohen Upinu Es Habayis that in the same way as by Tumas Batim we delay the Kohen even for Dvar Reshus, so too by Tumah B'Gufay we can delay the Kohen even for Dvar Reshus. Continues the Gemara Omar Mar. And this is taking us back to what we saw in the Brisa that we learn out from the words Ubiyom Herois boy. We just mentioned that Rabbi Yehuda learned from those words that there are some times where the Kohen comes, and sometimes the Kohen doesn't come. Omar Mar, Yesh Yom Shataroye boy, Yesh Yom Shiataroye boy. The question is, my mashma, how did you see it in the words Ubiyom Herois boy? The pasuk just says Ubiyom Herois boy, Basar Chai Yitzvah. On the day where the Kohen will see this Basar Chai, this raw flesh, which we're not discussing now, the halachos of Basar Chai, but in that case, Yitzmo, he'll become Tomei. So Omar Abaya says, Im Kei Nichtav Rachmona Bayoim. It would have sufficed to say, Bayoim Herois by Basar Chai Yitzmo. My Ubayoim, what's the extra Vav doing there? Shma Minod, the extra Vav is teaching us that Yoim Shataroye boy, Yoim Shiataroye boy, Ubayoim. When it's a day that you're going to see, that seems to tell us that there are days that you don't see. Rava, that's how Abai understood it. Rava Omar, Rava says, Kula Kro Yiseiruhu. He says, I actually don't need the whole word Ubayoim. D'imke Nichtav Rachmon, it would have been enough to say, Ubahei Rois, Boy Basar Achai. When you observe in it, Basar Achai, then Yitzma, what's Ubayoim? Why do you have to mention the day at all? My Ubayoim. Shma Minor, Rava says from here that the Ubayoim is telling us that there are days that you can see. Yesh Yoim Shataroya Boy. How's Abaya going to explain? Abaya says that I learned it from the extra Vav. How's Abaya explaining the actual word Bayoim? Abaya says no. I need the word Bayoim to tell us Bayoim v'loy balayla, to say that the Kohen only goes to see the Tzaras only during the day, not at night. So Abaya learns from Bayoim that the Kohen only sees from the day. In the Vov, he says to teach us that there are some days that the Kohen doesn't go. Rava says from Ubayoim there are some days the Kohen doesn't go. So how's Rava going to learn that Kohen can only go in the day, not in the night? Rava Bayoim v'loy balaylo minale. There are going to be two answers. The first one is nafkele milachol mare eine kohen. The pasuk says, "Vim poreach tifrach hatzaras bo'oir, b'chisus hatzaras es kol ha'oir hanega miroshel ad raglov l'chol mare eine hakohen." So you see that it has to be visible to the kohen. When is it visible to the kohen? When there's daylight. When is there daylight? That's in the day, not in the night. So Rava learns out from there that the kohen can only see tzaras in the day and not in the night. The Abaya says that because now we have the question, according to Abaya that learns out from the word bayoim that the kohen only sees the tzaras in the day, what's Abaya going to do with the words l'chol mari einei kohen? The pasuk is trying to tell us that it's got to be seen by the einei kohen, both eyes of the kohen. If a kohen is blind in one eye, he can't see tzaras. Says the Gemara, okay, Rava, but once Rava needs this pasuk to tell us that the kohen can only see by day, not by night, how's Rava going to know that a kohen blind in one eye cannot see? Does Rava not need this pasuk to teach us that same halacha that a kohen with one eye cannot see tzaras? Says the Gemara, Enoch nam, you're right. Okay, then the question comes back. If the words l'chol mari einei kohen is to teach us that the kohen has to see with both eyes, how does Rava know that kohen can only see tzaras in the day, not in the night? Says the Gemara, Nafkadei learns out from a different pasuk. The pasuk says, "Uvoa sheloi habayis v'higid lakohen leimor kanega nira li baboyis." A person comes to the kohen and says that I see a stain in my home. What does it mean, the li? Li, it's got to be seen by the naked eye and not seen with the aid of a candle, a lamp, or any other type of a fire, or any other type of source of light. It's got to be, you can see it just in daylight. So from there you see, li v'lo oiri, I can see it, means it's day. So you see from there, kohen can only come and see the tzaras in the day. The Abaya learnt out from the word biyoim that kohen only comes by day. What's he going to do with the word li? So Abaya says, if we'd learn it out from there, hava mina, hana milituma dilav de gufe. I may have thought that since that pasuk is only talking about tumas batim, the tzaras on the home, maybe only tzaras in the home is restricted to the daytime. Aval tuma de gufe bat tzaras on the flesh of a person, afilu la'oirei nami, even if you couldn't see it with the natural light because it's night, but if there's a candle, it's good enough. Kumash malon, that's why Rava says, I need the words bayoim. So I need also kanega nira li babayis to tell us that you have to see it with your naked eye, but that's only for tumas batim. I need bayoim, says Rabbi, to tell us that even by tzaras on the flesh of a person, the kohen can only come in the day and not in the night. And in Yitzchok in the next year, we're going to learn the next Mishnah.